floor, debating my colleagues as aggressively and fairly as I can about what's wrong with this bill and why it should be reversed and why it should be replaced. I thank the President. I thank my colleague from Alaska. I yield the floor.
Mr. President.
The Senator from Alaska.
Thank you very much, and to my colleague from North Carolina, thank you very much, and thank you for the part about explaining the process here. Some people think by tomorrow, if there's a vote on defunding, suddenly something happens. So thank you for pointing out the issue of the statute. And we may not agree on the total picture, but I've presented lots of ideas on how to fix the Health Care Act. I'd be anxious to continue to work on that as we pass by tomorrow. So thank you for your comments on that. Mr. President, I rise today, as we are out here today, I know the last 24, actually 48 hours or longer, we've been talking about a lot of issues, predominantly about health care, and I can read all kinds of stories about people have called me, like the 50-year-old male who, rural Alaska, who self-employed, had lung cancer today, and because of a CHIA and ability to get in that high-risk pool, he now is living a good life, healthier, and running his business. I can go through all kinds of stories, but I don't want us to forget the big issue that is facing us come Monday, or Tuesday, really, and that's the risk of a government shutdown and what that means. We can talk about health care for a long time. We will, for generations, and they've done it for generations before I even got here. So we need to focus on the big issue that faces us, and that's this shutdown that's potentially in front of us. The inability for Congress to pass a budget, pass an annual appropriation bills, address these harmful automatic budget cuts, known around here as sequester, because of truly political brinksmanship is honestly shameful, not what I came here for. And you know, when the budget passed here, I didn't vote for it, but it passed. The House has a budget. It passed. But now, for some reason, we can't get people from the minority to sit down and let us move to a conference committee to figure this out. To me, it's amazing. It's a simple thing. I mean, for the time I've been here, for 3 years at minimum, we've been hearing that there's no budget passed. Now, there is one passed. Again, I didn't vote for the one that passed here. It had too much taxes, but it did pass. Well, let's get on with the conference committee and figure it out. I know the presiding officer and my colleague from Montana that's here also, you know, we're on the Appropriations Committee. We've passed our appropriation bills out of committee, and most of them passed in some form of bipartisanship. Not 100%, but in some form. Now, you know, bringing those forward would be helpful. It would help us do the job we're sent here to do on an annual basis, and that's get our budgets moving forward. And I came here to get the job done. I came here to represent Alaska. I didn't come here to participate in this back and forth and showmanship that has to go on in order for someone to get some highlight on TV or be able to get some byline on TV or whatever it might be. These games that are being played and played out here on the Senate floor in front of the public is affecting our national security and homeland security. Think about it. What is it like for a federal employee today as they watch these shenanigans that go on? If you're one of the 5,000 dedicated Department of Defense employees in Alaska, you didn't get paid for 6 days already this year because of sequestration. Now you're wondering if you're going to get a paycheck on time or face more furloughs because this institution may not be able to pass a clean continuing resolution. For those that are watching, a continuing resolution that says the budget we have, we're just going to continue for a short time while we try to get our appropriations bills to the floor so we can move those forward. It's not complicated. It keeps the government running, and it's the way we move this system forward, but it's not the right approach. We need to have regular order to get our appropriation bills and deal with the sequestration once and for all. And don't be confused here. I mean, I know people like to rag on the federal government, and they don't like this. They don't like. We're the largest service company in the country. We provide services. We don't make widgets. We don't make we produce service. We build roads. We're out there taking care of forest fires when they're happening, or we're taking care of our veterans. We're making sure we're protected in the homeland as well as across the world with our national defense. The list goes on and on. We're a service company. So as I sit here, and I'm honestly stunned to think that we're on this verge again. I don't know how many times we've been on this edge, this hanging over the edge of what might happen. Will we close down the government or not? Well, I'm not here to do that. As painful as these days are and going through the process, we need to get forward. We cannot delay military members' paychecks, leaving them wondering if they get paid again or they can pay their bills on time, knowing they will face the same situation again and again in a few months. We need to finish this so we can move on to the annual Department of Defense bill so we can continue to fund this federal government. Many of our military members are also wondering if they will be trained and ready for the missions we call them out to do. Commanders can't plan training exercise right now like the Red Flag in Alaska, which is a critical training program not only for our military but our allies, because they don't know how much money they will have for the next fiscal year to plan for it. You can't just decide on a Friday or a Thursday that next week we're doing a massive military mission. It takes months of planning, but you can't plan if you don't have the resources. Military leaders are not only losing sleep over the rogue nations like Iran and North Korea, they're losing sleep over not having the funds to pay their workforce and breaking faith with their troops that we ask them to do so much. We're asking the one organization that we rely on to be ready 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, 365 days a year to stay that way amidst the uncertainty and potential shutdowns. We're asking its members to carry on without expecting pay or money to train. It's unrealistic, it's unreasonable, and it's risky for our national security. Our nation's veterans, and we have 77,000 veterans in Alaska, are wondering what shutdown means for their claims that they're waiting for, wondering if the process will create even lengthier delays in already an unacceptably slow process. I know the presiding officer and I have worked to try to streamline this process, get these claims resolved after hundreds of days of delay. Our nation's homeless veterans are wondering if they will be able to get the housing vouchers during the shutdown or lose them in budgets or cuts already, or if they will have to sleep on the streets after serving our country because we can't pass a continuing resolution budget. In Alaska, let me tell you what that's like when you're in October, moving into November, into December. Sleeping on the streets is not a comfortable situation. Sleeping on the streets, period, is not a comfortable situation. But when you're in those cold situations, it's even worse. We're hurting local economies and stifling potential job growth. $202 million of military construction will be delayed in Alaska because we haven't passed an annual military construction and Veterans Affairs bill. Now, we've passed it in appropriations, and we're ready. We want to do it, but this back and forth of 1 week, 1 month, 2 month, continuing resolution, again, delays the regular order so we can create certainty. Certainty with our ability to provide services to this country, but also certainty for the business community, these construction companies. In Alaska, you cannot just start a project in December and say, well, we're going to start doing the foundation work. It's a little cold. The ground is a little frozen. You have to be doing this in the summer. You have to be planning for it in the spring and late winter. So for us to delay these projects, all we do is hurt the private sector jobs that are related to it, the families that depend on this, and the veterans that depend, and the military that depends on these important construction projects. When it comes too late, project is delayed, costs go up. It's not complicated. But this place here, I've learned over time now, it's almost like irrelevant. Some of these people care about that. They don't care what it costs. They don't even want to know because they know when they hear it, it'll be an unbelievable cost that we have to bear because of this delay and these tactics. And I get it. We're not going to always agree on everything. But we have to get to compromise and solve these problems. As an appropriator, that's what we do in appropriations. Not always easy. Some things I want to have happen, we can't have happen. Same thing on the other side. But at the end of the day, we find common ground. Sequestration also has hurt the Coast Guard. In Alaska, the Coast Guard is the lifeblood of our oceans. For our fishing industry, oil and gas industry, our recreational industry, our cruise ship industry, I can go through the list. They've lost $200 million from their operating expenses because sequestration and the inability for some people to come to the table to solve this problem. That means about 30% fewer cutters and aircrafts doing things like enforcing fishing laws and reduced presence in the Arctic. They had to cut back on patrols to stop drugs coming from South America into this country. And when you think about it, that impact is significant. It spreads throughout this whole country. As the drugs come in and the job opportunities go out, millions of Americans are watching to see what Congress does. We've created a situation where not only are we unable to budget for this country, but Americans can't budget for their future. They can't even budget for the holiday season. It's unbelievable. We need to complete this work on this short-term continuing resolution and move right into our annual appropriation bills and address sequestration once and for all and finish the budget. We owe it to the American people. We owe it to them to ensure they have certainty, and we owe it to our business community to make sure they know. Look at last week in the market. It wasn't a slide deep, but it was a slide because, and if you read the Wall Street Journal today, there's a commentary and some articles in there, or last night, because they weren't sure what the House was doing. Because the House was playing these games, back and forth. Let's tie this to it. Let's tie that to it. They're playing with an economy that has come back from the depths of a great recession. Now, is it a perfect economy? No. Is it better? Absolutely. Do we have a fragile moment that we need to continue to build on this? Yes. I'm not sure if those folks on the other side care about making sure our economy is strong. In some ways, I think they want it to falter so they can go into an election and just say, see those guys? They caused the economy to go bad. So vote them out. That's all this seems to be. I was down here earlier presiding, and one of my colleagues on the other side mentioned a story about Alaska, and I was appreciative that he recognized Alaska and understood that we have some issues up in Alaska. And then he mentioned 3 other senators in their states, all the ones, to be very frank with you, that are, targeted by groups as the ones that most risk this election cycle. I get it, but that's not what people are here to do. If you want to have that conversation, let's go outside this building, run those ads, do whatever you want on the campaign trail, do whatever you need to do. But to play these games and kind of pretend that you're doing the government's business is really irresponsible. That's not what's going on. What's going on is picking people and trying to pigeonhole them so they can run commercials against them in campaigns. I get that, but I think the American people are fed up with it. They're outraged by it. I hear it every time I go back to Alaska. I hear it when I talk to people around the country. We have to do the work we were sent here to do. And the work here is to get our business done. Now, we have setting policy as part of it, passing appropriation bills. We should be doing it on an annual basis, doing a budget. Again, we passed one out of here. I didn't support it because it had too many taxes, but we passed it. House passed it. Let's get on with doing the work. Every day we sit around, and I know some sit around and they say, well, we have to do it this way. This is the only way it works. You don't understand the Senate. It's complicated. Hey, life is complicated. Get on with it. The public expects us to do our job. Quit using process, rules, and gobbledygook to try to get away from your responsibility here. It is time that we sit down and deal with it. And you know what? There will be some in my party, there will be some in their party that, guess what, aren't going to get what they want. That's the way it works. You compromise, you find your balance, and you move forward. You don't sit around here and you try to get 100%. I'd love 100% on everything. I will try every day. But that's not how it ends up all the time. You compromise, you try to find the middle ground. That's what we should be doing here. As an appropriator, that's what I want to do. That's what I try to do on an Appropriations Committee. That's what we should be doing on this floor. I hope that, and I get it, there's a couple on each side. It happens, and we saw one that sat out here for 21 hours or whatever the heck it was. And I get it. He's passionate. It's important to him to make his point. But I also see what else is going on. Focus on our job. We're U.S. senators. We're not candidates for some other office. We're U.S. senators. We're here to do the job. It's time to get busy, do it. American people want it. Alaskans tell me every day they want us to do this. Let's figure this out and get on with the show. Mr. President, yield my time. Mr. President, I notice an absence of quorum.
Clerk will call the roll.
Mr. Alexander.
Mr. President,
Senator from Montana.
I'd ask the quorum call be eviscerated.
Without objection.
Thank you, Mr. President. Mr. President, as we inch closer and closer to potentially shutting down this government, I rise to remind my colleagues what a shutdown would mean for our constituents. I also want to remind my colleagues that it doesn't have to be this way. Budget battles and debt ceiling debates are the norm in Congress right now, but there was a time. There was a time when both parties worked together, and the American people benefited. Now, it hasn't always been rosy. The budget battles of the mid-'90s shut our government down for nearly a month. Personal insults here in the world's greatest deliberative body used to be common. And back in the 1850s, a senator was beaten on the Senate floor. But through it all, Americans trusted their government to meet its constitutional responsibility and keep the lights on. After all, if we couldn't agree on anything else, at least we could agree on keeping the lights on. Today, constant political brinksmanship and grandstanding replace common sense compromise and actual governing. Mr. President, it is taking a toll on all Americans, and Montanans are no exception. With a government shutdown once again a real possibility, America's frustration is reaching new heights. For some folks, the shutdown is another opportunity to shake their heads and bemoan the state of affairs right here in Washington, D.C. They're the lucky ones, because for others, a shutdown will hurt their health, their wallets, their bottom lines. I'm talking about a veteran who could be anywhere in this country, whose disability case appeal could and probably will be delayed if we have a government shutdown. A senior citizen waiting for a Social Security check, a small business owner waiting to get potentially a contract that could fix a decaying road infrastructure, hotels and other businesses around our national parks that would be closed if we have a government shutdown, also holding their breath to see what we're doing here these days. And if the parks close because of a government shutdown, the money coming in and out of the wallets of those businesses and those folks who not only drove to the park in anticipation to be able to utilize it, but the businesses around the park would be impacted very negatively. Everybody knows about the Balkan play that's driving the economic growth in North Dakota and eastern Montana, but if the government shuts down, Bureau of Land Management's permitting office would be shut down too. And that means wells would be delayed and the jobs that come with them. And since the House Republicans have been unwilling to begin negotiations on a new farm bill, farmers and ranchers are going to have a lot of questions come October 1st, on a day that not only will the government shut down, but the farm bill will expire as well. So not only could some folks lose critical nutrition assistance, farmers and ranchers would have no place to go to get their questions answered about the fact that there's no more farm bill for commodity or a commodity title. No more ability to get questions answered about conservation that needs to be planned for far ahead of time. Why? Because their local Farm Service Agency office will be closed. Like the other government offices, nobody's going to be there to answer the phone. In Montana, Washington now is shorthand for uncertainty. Congress is shorthand for dysfunction, and faith in government is being eroded because some folks around here are more concerned about raising money on C-SPAN than the people of this great country and the American economy. It needs to stop. Mr. President, the American people expect members of Congress to make smart, responsible decisions based on the best information that we have. That means advocating for issues that matter, compromising to get something done. That means giving a little and getting a whole lot in return. It's called governing. That's a lesson some folks around here need to learn. I would have thought that flirting with a government shutdown and costing taxpayers billions of dollars in 2011 would have been sufficient enough of a lesson. Or maybe coming within a few hours of falling off the so-called fiscal cliff in 2012 would have been a sufficient lesson. I would have thought that causing an unprecedented credit downgrade 2 years ago by threatening not to raise the debt ceiling would have knocked some sense into some folks. And I would think that the American people's overwhelming desire not to shut the government down come October 1st would cause my colleagues on the other side of the aisle to use common sense. But here we are, playing politics once again as regular Americans twist in the wind. There is a way forward, Mr. President, and it doesn't have to start with political games at the 11th hour. It starts with working through the regular budgets and appropriations process and not proposing amendments just to slow the process down. Funding the government is the easy part. In less than a month, we once again will be reaching a debt ceiling, a much more serious issue. If we don't raise it before then, we won't be able to pay our bills. The economy will be devastated. Crashing into the debt ceiling will cause our credit rating to drop, increase our interest rates not only on our government debt, but for anybody who has debt. If you don't believe a farmer from Big Sandy, Montana, maybe you'll believe a guy by the name of Mark Zandi, an economist who's advised presidents, presidential candidates, Fortune 500 companies. He said failing to raise the debt ceiling will hurt consumers, business confidence, force businesses to stop hiring, raise borrowing costs for average Americans. He's far from alone. Former Republican Senator Judd Gregg says failing to pay our bills would lead to job losses and more debt. He calls failing to raise the debt ceiling a terrible policy, would produce difficult times for people on Main Street. Senator Gregg, who I had the opportunity to serve with, spent 18 years here in the Senate. He knows that as long as Congress fails to provide the American people the political and economic certainty by funding the government, raising the debt limit, we won't be able to tackle other important issues like replacing the sequester that the senator from Alaska talked about, replacing with smart budget cuts, or striking a long-term budget agreement that will put this nation on solid economic footing. Mr. President, a government shutdown would be irresponsible and it would be unnecessary. Congress needs to do its job by finding a way to responsibly keep the government running. We cannot keep holding businesses, seniors, working families, veterans, students, our military men and women hostage to the political whims and aspirations of a select few. When I was a member of the Montana Senate, my colleagues and I knew what we had to get done every session. Passing a budget was at the top of the list. Even if we didn't agree where to cut or where to spend, we worked together to figure it out. And just like my former colleague in Montana did this spring, former colleagues in Montana did this spring, we passed a budget, we kept the state government running. Here in Washington, there's a lot of pressures that we don't face at the state level. There are news channels that give any senator a chance to get on TV, and every issue has an advocacy group fighting for its share of the pie. But real leaders make tough decisions. Real leaders work together to find common ground and move our nation forward. Real leaders put their constituents first. It's not too late. It's not too late for us to regain the trust of the American people, but it's going to take some work. We won't be able to do it right away, but we ought to start this week. And we can start by responsibly funding the government, providing our economy and our nation with the confidence that they need. That's what we did in Montana, and that's what we need to do here in Washington. The American people are calling for an end to the brinksmanship and an end to the gridlock. And it's time we start to listen to them. Mr. President, I also want to thank Senator Mikulski, the chair of the Appropriations Committee, for agreeing to end a special interest provision that was included by the House of Representatives in last year's government funding bill a few, a, 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 and the one that was sent over here recently. A few years ago, the committee voluntarily agreed to match the House's earmark moratorium, and I think it's interesting that our friends in the House make very serious statements about the need to get rid of earmarks and then stuff a few items in the spending bill last year that directly benefited a couple of the biggest multinational businesses in this country. I spoke to Chairwoman Mikulski about this issue this spring, and she was very gracious. Listened to my concerns, and I'm pleased to see that she and Senator Reid have eliminated one of those corporate earmarks, and I want to thank them for that. It'll make this bill a lot cleaner. In closing, I just want to say this. I know there's people in this body that want to work together to make this country all it can be. And I also know there's people in this body that would love to see a government shutdown because they might be able to pad their own PACs or political coffers. And maybe it will take a government shutdown to make them understand how bad this would be for the American people, its businesses, its working families. But I certainly hope that doesn't happen. The American people don't deserve it. This country doesn't deserve it, as it comes out of one of the worst economic times since the 1930s. And quite frankly, being a businessman myself, I look at what goes on in Washington, D.C. and all the challenges that businesses have in this country. And the biggest challenge we have right now is Washington, D.C. Let's start moving the country forward by working together. Let's fund the government. Let's not shut it down. And let's do what's right when the debt limit debate comes around. Mr. President, I yield the floor. Support.
We'll call the roll.
Mr. Alexander.
Mr. President,
Senator from
I
Montana.
ask the quorum call be eviscerated.
Without objection.
I ask unanimous consent that the Senate proceed to a period of morning business with senators permitted to speak for up to 10 minutes each.
Without objection.
I ask unanimous consent the Senate proceed to calendar number 196, S1348.
Clerk will report.
Calendar number 196, S1348, a bill to reauthorize the Congressional Award Act.
Without objection, the Senate will proceed to the measure.
I ask unanimous consent the Carper Amendment, which is at the desk, be agreed to. The bill as amended be read a third time and passed, and a motion to reconsider be laid upon the table with no intervening action or debate.
Without objection.
Mr. President, I ask unanimous consent the Senate proceed to the consideration of S-261 submitted earlier today.
Clerk will report.
J.Res. 261, designating the week beginning September 23, 2013 as National Historically Black Colleges and Universities Week.
Without objection, the Senate will proceed to the measure.
I ask unanimous consent the resolution be agreed to, the preamble be agreed to, the motion to reconsider be laid upon the table with no intervening action or debate.
Without objection.
Mr. President, I ask unanimous consent the Senate proceed to the immediate consideration of S.Res. 262, submitted earlier today by Senator Donnelly and Isaacson.
Clerk will report.
S.Res. 262, supporting the goals and ideals of suicide prevention awareness.
Without objection, the Senate will proceed to the measure.
I further ask that the resolution be agreed to, the preamble be agreed to, and the motion to reconsider be considered made and laid upon the table with no intervening action or debate.
Without objection.
Mr. President, I ask unanimous consent that when the Senate completes its business today, it adjourn until 9:30 a.m. on Friday, September 27, 2013, and that following the prayer and pledge, the morning hour be deemed expired, the journal of the proceedings be approved to date, and the time for the two leaders be reserved for their use later in the day. That following any leader remarks, the Senate resume consideration of J.Res. 59, the continuing resolution, under the previous order.
Without objection.
And that the filing deadline for all second-degree amendments to the joint resolution be 10:30 a.m. tomorrow.
Without objection.
There will be up to 4 roll call votes at 12:30 p.m. tomorrow. If there is no further business coming before the Senate, I ask that it be adjourned under the previous order.
The Senate will stand adjourned until Friday, 27th of September at 9:30 a.m.
Debate continued today over a continuing resolution that would fund the federal government past September 30th, which is Monday. The senators are considering a House-passed version that would defund the health care law. Senate Majority Leader Harry Reid unveiled an amendment yesterday that would remove the health care language from the bill. The leader asked that a vote to end all debate take place this evening, but it was objected to by Utah Senator Mike Lee. So that vote to end debate is expected tomorrow, along with a few other votes related to the bill. And those votes will be at around 12:30 Eastern Time. And as always, you can see live coverage here on C-SPAN 2. Some tweets now from members of Congress on a possible government shutdown and the defunding